Max, you've dedicated your life to enhancing safety in schools. I think you've advocated increasing physical security, introducing threat assessment programs, advocating for school resource officers. These programs all serve to deter mass shootings in schools. One of the things that you've advocated is patient and very passionately for is dissemination of best practices in school safeties. I'm proud to co-sponsor a bill named after your son that will codify federal clearinghouse of best practices. How did you come to the conclusion that this vital element of protecting children in schools is an important approach?
Thank you, Senator Grassley. After Alex was murdered in the Parkland school shooting, I made it my mission to do everything I could to make sure that this never happened again. And when I traveled the country, the question that I got from a lot of educators were, where are these best practices? And what they were getting was a lot of confusing material from a lot of the different federal agencies. So we had this idea to create a federal school safety clearinghouse. And it's really been a model for what the federal government can do if they all work together. And all of the agencies that work on school safety, so you've got the Department of Education, Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Justice, and the Department of Homeland Security are now all working together. They're coordinating, they're cooperating, and they have an editorial board. So they've gone through this issue, and everything, all the best practices that schools need are all housed on schoolsafety.gov. Because as I traveled the country, there's a lot of schools that were doing great things, but the problem was that a lot of schools didn't know that, and it was really only contained to the vicinity around that particular area. And so schools need help. Most educators become educators because they want to teach and they want to help children, not because they want to be school security experts. There's only one program that I know of that is the most successful that teaches teachers about school safety in college, and that is at the Indian River State College in Florida. They're doing great things. And I think it's really important that teachers are taught that in college before they become teachers, so that the burden is not on the school district as well. So this clearinghouse that is formed is doing wonderful things. Not only do they have a place to have best practices, they also have a consolidated place for grant dollars. So on the site, school districts can go on their new grant finder tool. There's 40 different programs available and over $2 billion. So I encourage all educators and parents. Parents want information about how to make their schools safe. And that information is all available on schoolsafety.gov. And schools that are curious about what they should do first and where their gaps are, they have a school readiness tool where all they do is they fill out a 10-question questionnaire on the site, and that'll tell them, based on their answers, that'll tell them what they should be doing first, what they should be doing second, where their gaps are in school safety, and then based on their gaps, it directs them to grant dollars. So I really hope that this Congress will pass the Luke and Alex School Safety Act, and that is included in the new bipartisan agreement on gun safety.
This will have to be my last question to Max and to Amy. The Threat Assessment Center data shows over 80% of the active shooter events lasting less than 5 minutes. So would both of you tell me, what role do school resource officers serve in mitigating firearm violence in schools? Let's start with Amy.
Thank you, Senator. We know that when we've reached the point where it's too late, where we're not talking about prevention, we are talking about an individual who is an active threat to that school, whether because they're a mass shooter or any other threat. And in that moment, what matters is how quickly there is an armed response, an armed confrontation. School resource officers play a role in that armed confrontation because they are the ones on scene. It lessens that amount of time. And you actually saw this in Santa Fe High School several weeks after Parkland, where within under 4 minutes, you had school resource officers draw that shooter's attention to themselves, heroically take on that gunfire, And we would have seen, but for that, a rate of death quite similar to Parkland, but instead it was far less. And we've seen this, I've listed in my written testimony a number of other occasions where school resource officers have been immediately on the scene to confront that threat, again, whether it's a mass shooting or any other threat, because we know that that is in that moment, the thing that matters most is the quickness of that response.
Mac, maybe you can give a short response so I don't take time from my colleagues.
In Parkland, in just 3 minutes and 51 seconds, 24 people were shot and or killed, including my little boy, Alex. And school resource officers are critical to being on scene. In Florida, we are the only state in the country that we've mandated that every K through 12 school, there has to be an armed security officer. When these incidents happen, the most important thing is that they stop the killing and then stop the dying. And I just wish they were sooner. But all other thing that needs to be addressed is the law enforcement response in Parkland. We had 9 sheriff's office deputies that waited outside. We saw the same thing in Uvalde. Law enforcement needs to do better at the training. When the Broward Sheriff's Office was only conducting active shooter training every 3 years, that is not sufficient. And we saw the result.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're calling on the Democratic side based on the early bird rule, and next up is Senator Feinstein.
Thank you very much, Mr.